What is really bugging me? Welcome to our Community Listens webinar series. And here you see that it's Chapman Foundation for Caring Communities. You get a sneak preview into our new name, which is going to be kicked off in January. And our Community Listens will now be the class, the in-person class that we teach, which is what everybody called it to begin with. So you're getting a sneak preview into our new logo, our new name, as we wrap up these series going into February. So what is really bugging me? When we complete this session, you're going to discover that judgment clouds the lens through which we view the world, especially the lens we view other people. You're going to be able to explore ways in which we judge ourselves and others, and figure out ways to counter that. You're going to analyze the difference between behavior and judgment. There is a stark difference. And finally, you're going to create an action plan for change. I cannot emphasize more the action plan. We as adults have the option to change or not change, right? And yet, if we don't have clear steps as to how we're going to change and some sort of accountability, we probably won't make those changes. And when we have accountability, which is most helpful when you're doing it with somebody else, yet you can do it by yourself strategically. And one of those strategic moves is an action plan. So we're going to talk more about that at the end. But I just want you to know that's where we're going. So, confrontation. This whole series is on effective confrontation. How do we do it well? The tagline is how to get what we want without the drama. How do we present confrontation messages in a way that doesn't make somebody defensive? We believe that confrontation messages are conversation starters. Hey, I'm not even sure if you realize this. ... Confrontation messages always include 3 ingredients: their primary feelings, specific behavior, and impact. If you were with us last month, we reviewed primary feelings. And if you were unable to attend, I don't think the recording is out quite yet, but it will be soon. I would recommend going back and listening to that, because there's a difference between primary feelings and secondary feelings. And it's important that we dive into the primary feelings. The secondary feelings are what everybody sees around us. They can tell by our body language when we're angry or sad or happy. It's important to dive deeper. And today we're going to be talking about specific behavior. And then next month, we're going to be talking about impact. The order is unimportant, yet all 3 ingredients need to be present. And what I recommend is calling them the FBIs: feelings, behavior, impact. We can always remember when we think, oh, what's the composition of a confrontation message? Oh yeah, the FBIs: feelings, behavior, impact. The process of crafting a confrontation message is about slowing down. It's about slowing down to identify those primary feelings. It's about slowing down to recognize specific behavior that is bugging you without attaching judgment. And we do it all the time. And it is about slowing down to determine the impact their behavior is having on you, your team, your family, etc. Each of us typically finds it's easier to identify and include 2 of the 3 ingredients in our confrontation message. Is it important to include all 3? Because the person whom you are confronting may need all 3 to really feel the weight of the message you are sending. And I just said that you typically are two, and if you're sending two and the other person, one of those is not theirs, then they're only receiving one. So it's just really important, even if it feels awkward, if you're not a feelings person, finding your feelings can be very important to you and to the other person. If impact is not important to you, like I could figure out my feelings pretty easily. The impact was more difficult. What I found was that for task-oriented people especially, the impact really weighs on them. And so if I was sending a confrontation message and it only had feelings and behavior and the other person needed the impact, they might not have enough incentive to make that change or especially feel the weight of it. So it's very important that we want to include all three. So we're going to talk about the difference between behavior and judgment. When we put judgment aside, we are more apt to feel connected to others, and the other person is more apt to feel connected to us. So behaviors can be seen, felt, heard. They're observations, and it's the act of seeing something. It is simply witnessing without assessing. This is a novel idea to us humans. Unfortunately, when we observe, we usually attach judgment. Whether we're observing our own behavior or somebody else's, we often attach judgment. So judgments are opinions we form to ascribe morality or deem a value on the behavior of others. And it's judgments or labels we attach to behaviors, actions, or words of others. And I would go on and say, and ourselves. We often judge ourselves without really even realizing that. Because when we judge others, it's because we are judging ourselves. We judge ourselves first. We become very critical and upset with ourselves, and it feels easier to put the spotlight off of us onto other people. And so we start to judge others. If we want to stop judging others, we need to learn to judge ourselves less. Becoming self-aware of our tendency to judge ourselves is powerful, very powerful. When we let go of judgment, it allows us to deeply connect with others. When we let go of judgment, it also, the positivity enhances our lens, which frees us up to observe the situation more clearly and fully connect with others. I want you to think about the pre-work that we asked you to read. The story about a woman in yoga class, and how when she was stretching, her yoga instructor said, remember to observe without judgment. Notice how far you can go, but don't judge your flexibility. And at that moment, she had a eureka, an aha moment. Like, wait a minute. Every move I make, I often ascribe it to judgment. I look around the room and see everybody else, or a lot of people, being more flexible. And I judge myself accordingly. The author of the article went on to say that this instruction felt like a relief, an invitation to a new way of living. She began to think, what if I took it outside of the yoga class? What if I started doing it everywhere I go? It's a shift to observe myself without judgment. She started to enjoy yoga and other things instead of comparing herself to everyone else. She began to apply it to other places in her life. And it was a liberating feeling for her. And she even goes on to say it felt like a free pass in life. She didn't have to make a conclusion. And that's often what judgment does. It leads us to a conclusion that in all reality may be wrong. When we observe to better understand, we can accept their behavior versus feeling the need to agree or disagree. We have a webinar series that is for you to listen to if you want, and it's called Can I Accept Your Perspective? And we talk about agree or disagree, or simply to accept. When we say we will agree to disagree, it still feels judgmental because usually the tone indicates that I know what I'm talking about, you don't, but we'll agree to stop the conversation. That's not accepting someone where they are. So please, if you struggle with agree versus disagree, please go back and listen to that webinar. So I want you to go to your handout, and there is a place for you to do a real world reflection. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to work on this. I want you to think back to the first thing you thought this morning. Okay? A common observation I had of myself, and what was the judgment that we probably attached to that? I'm going to give you 2 minutes right here. Okay, I want to invite you to place in chat what you thought and what judgment it led to. Or maybe you didn't ascribe a judgment. But let's be honest, this is a vulnerable place that we are safe to share. What was your first observation? One of you said stiff and old. Yes. Another of you said, so much to do today, I'm not enough. Another of you shared, anxious about my day. Another, slow waking up, so am I prepared for today? Another of you said, I'm too quick to look immediately at my phone. Yes, we all have it laying by our bedside, don't we? Another of you said, I don't feel renewed in the mornings anymore. I must be getting older. Another of you said, I signed up for this webinar. Judgment is that I overbooked myself. Yes, and it's just one more thing on my to-do list. Another of you said, I don't sleep well and feel tired. I actually got a great night's sleep last night, which is yay, yay. But Lately, I've been Netflixing, I guess you would say, and staying up too late. And then my dog wakes me up early. And, I operate on 5 or 6 hours of sleep. And I go, Julie, why are you doing that? Sometimes we self-sabotage ourselves, but that's a whole different topic. Yes, all of you noticed some of your observations this morning, and thank you so much for sharing. Our webinars are only as deep as you all are willing to share, and so your thoughts and feedback and words definitely make our time together richer. My hope is that this exercise that you either did this morning with us or you did earlier with the pre-work, I'd encourage you, if you haven't done it before, but to print it out and start doing it through the day. Because there's, like, while I'm driving, common observation, which leads to a judgment. Looking at being able to observe other drivers without judgment. And I've been working on, when somebody cuts me off, think they must be having a really hard day. And almost send a goodwill thought to them, or to send them on their way. I try very hard not to take driving personal, the other people's behaviors. Another one is the people you live with. What is an observation? And then what judgment does that lead us to? My hope is that I can observe them without judgment. And then finally, reflecting on the day. What is an observation I often make of myself? And how do I judge myself? And now I can observe my day without judgment. Now here's her caveat for the woman who wrote the article. Trying to find her name, Ginger Rothhaus. She says, and just in case this activity has you judging yourself, remember not to judge your judgment with judgment. Observe your thoughts and behaviors, which will allow you to move forward without judgment. So as we move away from judging ourselves, because you remember I said that in order to stop judging others, we have to stop judging ourselves. So this exercise or something like it could help you start to be aware of when you judge, because often we don't even realize it. Like I wake up and say, oh my gosh, Julie, you're just being lazy. You're laying in bed too long. Well, on the surface, it feels like, that's just kind of jokingly laughing at myself. But it really paints the picture for the rest of the day that I started off lazy, where I could just be excited to have a moment to lay in bed and just let thoughts of the day wash over me before rushing off. As we move from judging ourselves less, let's switch the focus to staying out of judgment while observing others. So how do we judge others? So I'm going to throw some words up, and you'll start to see how those words can taint our vision of the other person. Now, one of you asked a great question. So is it reframing the story? I would say absolutely yes. And it seems like we can reframe lots of things in a way that is not lying. We want to be authentic. It's just looking through a different lens, a different perspective. When we go to confront somebody, They may share something with us that once that information is added to our own story, it makes sense what they're doing. And maybe we can even live with what they're doing since we have that new piece of information. So reframing the story sometimes can mean that we are lying. And I don't want that. We always want to be authentic. And yet when I wake up late and I'm rushing and I was lazy, and I just put air parentheses around lazy, instead of, wow, I must have needed more sleep. Let's take some deep breaths and go into the day. So thanks for asking that, because you're right. It is about seeing it from a different perspective, a different lens. So when we observe others, we often attach words of judgment to the behaviors exhibited, and we do it all the time without even thinking about it. Yes. So you added, so being curious, not judgmental. Yes, absolutely. Always being curious about your behavior, observing, just as if you are just taking in data. Oh, they did this. Oh, he did that. Oh, if I need to confront them, I will. I don't have to attach judgment to it. So thank you. Being curious in my mind is the key to lots of things, especially when we're listening. Now, these words that I'm going to throw up can often trigger defensiveness, resistance, or worse behavior in others. They're not helpful. When I put them up on the screen, I want you to understand that it is human nature to immediately think of this. What I want you to do is to start saying, okay, my initial reaction is they are lazy. What behavior is coming from that judgment? And how do I approach that behavior? I don't want you to beat yourself up that your first thought is they're lazy. That may be. Just don't take that because it's lazy, when we throw it back at them as lazy. We are not giving it a thought enough to come up with the true behaviors. So lazy and tacky, rude and hot-headed, rash, undependable, incapable of and hasty, don't care, disagreeable, impulsive, emotional. These are loaded, or we call trigger words. You will get them to fight you. They won't hear anything else, because what happens is they will hear that word and they will tell you all the reasons why they're not lazy, rude, undependable, disagreeable, emotional. They will point out times that they were not those words. We don't need to argue about that. We need to talk about the specific behavior, because when we start arguing about the judgment, we go down a rabbit hole. It's not productive. The more I learn about good communication, the more I realize that I want productive communication. I want communication that helps me feel connected to the other person, that moves us forward in the relationship, and shares my needs and shares their needs. When we use these trigger words, it counters that. The person is less likely to hear what we are saying to them. They're less likely to be willing to change to meet our needs. They're fighting words. They raise our emotional level and decrease our ability to be logical in the moment. When we beat ourselves up and pass judgment on ourselves, it triggers those things in us. And when we use them for others, it triggers that emotional state and decreases their ability to be logical in the moment. Judgments prevent us from seeing the good that lies in the other. It prevents us to look beyond appearances. We only see lazy. We only see undependable. We don't see the person. And especially if the behavior is consistent and they're doing it often, it's easy to just stay in that judgment place and just deem them one of those words on the screen. And that's just a small part of who they are. They are doing good work in other places, and yet we discount, oh, they're always argumentative. So you stop thinking about what they're actually saying, because you can discount their words. Judgments prevent us from seeing the good that lies beyond appearances. If you want to go beyond judgment, then what does specific behavior look like? So what is it that they're doing that is upsetting me? Behavior can be seen, felt, or heard. So it's when you are late for work, when you leave your dirty dishes in the sink, when you leave my car on empty. Very specific behaviors. They cannot argue with that. If they're arguing, then you have given them judgmental words. They can't, if you say, when you were late to work, they can't say, I wasn't late to work. Everybody knows they were late to work. The dirty dishes are sitting in the sink. We know that they're their dishes. When you borrow my car and return it on empty, I feel disappointed and frustrated, and I feel like I don't want to let you borrow the car ever again. When we set up the behavior in a way that they cannot debate, they actually start to hear it. The person being confronted knows exactly what I'm asking them to change. Many years ago, when I started practicing these skills and insights, one of my sons needed to, one of his tasks at home was to take the trash can out to the corner on Sunday nights. And he would remember to take it out, and yet he consistently forgot to bring it in. And when he left it out, I would pull into the driveway and it would be right there. So every time I came home, I would be reminded of the fact that he had not taken the trash can in. And in the past, I would walk in and I would just start yelling at him up the stairs for him to go take the trash can in. And I decided to do things differently. So I I texted him when I walked in and said, hey, will you come downstairs? And then he came down and I said, hey, when I see the trash can still at the corner and it gets in the way of me pulling the car in, I feel frustrated and I come into the house wanting to yell at you. And I don't want to do that. And he said, I forgot, sorry, I'll go do it now. Thanks. Appreciate it. So he would then, the next week, I pull in Tuesday. It's still out there. I walk in, text him to come down, and I say, hey, and he goes, I forgot. Sorry. I'll go do it now. Thanks. I appreciate it. The next week, it was brought in on Monday, and he no longer lives at the house. And when he is home on a Monday, he brings in the trash. When we want long-term change, we have to allow them to get there in the right way. Now, granted, if he went on 3 or 4 or 5 times, then you start coming up with alternatives. But just because somebody doesn't change right the first time we confront them, doesn't mean that we should switch strategies and start yelling again. I forget, you forget, we give each other grace and space. So here's sticky behavior, judgment versus specific behavior. So here's a young man, and I'm going to throw up a fact, and then we're going to see what kind of judgments we might make for him. Okay, so he has long hair. Just as an observation, we can observe that he has long hair. Often, though, we go a step further and we think about he's too lazy to cut his hair, or he wants to drive his parents crazy, or we can go on and on about why he might not cut his hair. And it may be the pure fact that he loves long hair. But we make judgments about it. And then with those judgments, we may not hire him, or we may not engage with him. Here's another one. He has a somber expression on his face. Judgment may be he doesn't seem to care. Observation is he's looking directly at me. He's staring me down. He's making me feel uncomfortable. What I found fascinating is that when we did this webinar last Thursday, we had somebody put in the chat room, I didn't see any of those things, those judgments. And I realized that it depends on the lens that we are viewing it from. We may have many friends that have long hair. So that is not a judgment for you at all. So be aware that our lens may make us judge some people more than others, because often they're the ones that don't look like us, don't act like us, are different from us. And then that's where we put the judgment on. The line between observing facts and placing judgment is easy to blur. Because of our biases or past experiences, we tend to believe certain things which get in the way of seeing the whole person. And one of you said earlier, when we're tired, hungry, emotional, or ill, we tend to fall back on our opinions rather than relying on observed facts. When somebody's at the end of their double shift, whether it's first responders or hospital staff, they may jump to conclusions instead of relying solely on facts. Being aware of this tendency helps us to counter it and also not overextend ourselves. That's when it gets in trouble. So one of you said, is it okay to have good judgment? It looks, he looks like a kind and caring person. Yes. That's a really, really good question. And I'd have to think about it. It's the first time I've had a question like that. My first initial is that it would be okay. The problem is that it keeps us in this judgmental frame of mind. Now, you may feel a closeness to him because he looks like a caring person, and yet it may get you in trouble because you assume he's a caring person, and then he does something to hurt you later on that you allowed because he appeared to be caring. So, that's how you can be taken advantage of too. I think that what you're trying to say most of all is that it's just human nature for us to go one direction or the other. A judgment that he's too lazy to cut his hair, or a judgment that he's a very caring person. And both of those directions can get us into trouble. And that it's best to make observations and then get to know the person for who they are. And then it can lead to us concluding that they're a caring person, because I've seen them do multiple behaviors that indicate they're caring. One of you said he's a drummer in a rock band and he's awesome. Yes. We can make up all kinds of stories with a picture. And that, to me, goes into even more reason why we judge on the surface often. Now, if we see him in a rock band and we've seen him multiple times and we know he's awesome, that's definitely we can think about it that way. I just want you all to practice observation rather than judgment. And think about, often our judgment is subconscious, and we are bringing it to the surface so that we can catch it even when it is a positive judgment, because it may not hold true the more you get to know that person. Great questions, great comments. So here, we're going to pause a minute and we're going to do a self-check. So I would like you to participate in the chat room, and I'm going to give you a judgment or a behavior that's kind of wrapped in judgment, and we're going to try to come up with a behavior statement instead. So here, let's give it a shot. So your driving is out of control and scaring me. So what could you say instead of that? Because that person would get defensive and maybe even drive faster. So what could we say? What is specific behaviors that would lead us to think that their driving is out of control? One of you said, you're going 85 in a 55-hour. Yes, and that's purely an observation, no judgment. Yes. One of you said, are we late? Yes. The thing is that sarcasm often can come across critical because of the tone, and it can be funny, and yet it still ticks them off. We may laugh about it, but it is hard to handle our tone, especially when we are scared. Another person said, you just passed that police officer, or you're driving over the speed limit. We put, when you change lanes quickly without signaling. Often, our first inclination and the first thing that comes out of our mind is, your driving is out of control and scaring me. And then that person starts speeding even more out of control. When we think a minute, say, what is it really? What are they doing that's really scaring me? And be specific as possible. You have more likely an opportunity for them to slow down and to think in different ways. So here is, you're always leaving the lights on. So how would you reword that? One of you said about the driving, when you drive this fast, really scares me. I would still try to be as specific. When you drive 85 in a 55, I feel scared. I'm not sure if I want to ride with you again. How would you say you're always leaving the lights on? What's a specific description of the behavior? While you're thinking about it, we put, when you leave the lights on and leave the room. You can also, as an impact, talk about how it increases the electric bill and you're not able to eat out as much. We want to hear, one of you said the living room light was on when we got up in the morning. And I would take out still, because that feels slightly judgmental. A lot of times what we say can be, it can be mostly behavior, but still one or two, I just use the word still, one or two words can get a negative reaction. So the observation is the living room light was on when we got up in the morning. Yes. One of you said, can we turn the lights off when we leave the room? That's an indirect way to ask. It feels more comfortable for some of our core behavior tendencies. And for those that are more direct, it feels almost passive aggressive because we're using a collective we. I would recommend trying to be as specific to the behavior. Just observe. The living room light was on when I got up this morning. I feel concerned that our electric bill is going to go up. Are you starting to see the difference? I think in the chat room you're beginning to understand of reframing it. One of you said, the reframing the story, you're reframing how you are going to present it in a way that they can hear. You're not being inauthentic. You're not trying to manipulate. You are realizing that you can positively ask for change and you can negatively ask for change. And you're more likely to have them hear and possibly change when you frame it in a way that doesn't bring out the defensiveness in them. Okay, we have one more for you all to put in the chat room. I can't believe you said that. You're being too emotional. So how could we frame it in a way that doesn't bring out their defensiveness? One of you said, you sound angry. Tell me more. Yes. What is it, or I heard you say, ... Those can work for sure. I want you to think about what behavior may they have just done that indicates to you that they're being too emotional. Well, let me ask you this. What words in this sentence are the judgmental words? Which words would make somebody feel very defensive? Emotional. Yes. Can't believe. Yes. Being too ... Absolutely. Yes. So we definitely don't want to put those words in. They are easy to throw around, aren't they? When somebody is yelling at us, you're just being too angry. Here's when you raise your voice and say you're going to leave. Very specific. You seem upset about something. Yes, trying to find the underlying thing that is bothering them. Being very specific. Some of what you said in the chat will get somebody talking, and that's why they can work. When we are actually confronting somebody about a behavior and we're thinking about it prior to us going to confront them, that's when specific behavior is important to get to in order for that person to hear what we need for them to change. One of you said, you seem upset about something. That will absolutely get them talking. That won't lead to confrontation. So if you want to get them talking, that's great. And that plays into the door openers in reflective listening. When we want to do a confrontation message where there's a specific behavior that we need them to be aware of their impact on us, it's important to come up with the behavior. So I hope you're starting to see where some of the statements that you made in the chat room could work to get the person to talk. It doesn't help us figure out exactly how to confront. Does that make sense? Are you all tracking me on that? This is when I wish I was in the classroom. One of you said that makes sense. Okay, so I'm just assuming that everybody has a thumbs up. And if not, let's talk about it at the end. One of you said, yes, this is why I'm so bad at confrontation. Yes. Confrontation makes us feel very uncomfortable. Not everybody, but a lot of us. One of you said makes sense, but in the heat of the moment, it's tough. Yes, yes, it is. And in the heat of the moment, getting them to talk, like you seem upset about something, works. You don't have time to come up with a confrontation message. When we're thinking about confronting somebody, we need to take the time to word it in a way. And that's what we're doing last month, this month, and next month. And then January, we're going to put it all together. And that's when we're going to really start to craft the messages. In the heat of the moment, you're absolutely right. It's tough. And to get the person talking is the best strategy. We're going to pause here for a real world reflection. I want you to think about what are the benefits of focusing on specific behavior for yourself, for the other person, for the relationship. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes to write it in your worksheet. Think about it. What is the benefit? Recording. Mother Teresa says, if you judge people, you have no time to love them. This quote speaks to me. When I first read it as we were developing this series, I thought of one of my sons in my relationship. And I believe that he feels judged by me and definitely not loved. I think there are moments that he feels that I love him, but I think that he feels judged. And so this statement convicted me, and I went to visit him and decided that no matter what, I was going to love him. Just love him. I wasn't going to try to change him, make him see different things. All I was going to sow into him love. And every time I felt myself going down a path of, well, I just want him to see a different perspective or a different view, I decided for that particular visit, I wasn't going to go down that path. My goal for that visit was to love him. We had an amazing visit. I even think that he saw things in different lights, in a different way, because I was loving him. He talked to me about different perspectives. When I judged him, I shut him down and really made him fight more for his perspective. When my objective and goal was to love him, it allowed him to breathe, because I really believe that when we feel judged, we feel stifled, we feel in a box. It's almost like the air has been taken out of that box. And when we feel loved and cherished, it blows that box up in a way that we can breathe again, and we can really see the world as a bigger place. My experience with that was that it allowed me to deepen my relationship with him, with his situation, because the idea of that box that I was talking about, he was in that box being filled, judged by multiple people. And when I allowed him to get out of that box, there were no boundaries anymore. He could see things in clearer ways. When our goal is connection, it is wise to focus on specific behavior and not opinions that are based on judgment. When we can love somebody, just love them. And my challenge to you as we look at Thanksgiving next week, and COVID style is going to be different from the past. I'm sure you're still going to be connecting, whether it's Zoom or outside or however you're going to connect with your loved ones. May this quote encourage you to set aside differences, set aside disagreements, show up with love first and foremost. And maybe like me, you don't allow judgment to come in or trying to fix somebody at all. Just make this a time, those connections, a time of pure love and excitement to be in their presence. And then see what happens. I believe that what I did for my son allowed us to start building a bridge for a better relationship. In review, behaviors or observations that we can be seen, felt, or heard. When we use judgments, they're labels we attach to others. When we judge ourselves, we're more apt to judge others. Taking time to reflect gives us the opportunity to move past our biases and focus on specific behavior. It is not putting somebody in that box where they feel like they can't breathe. And it's focusing on observation and being able to state the facts that are vital to our ability to effectively communicate, influence, and lead well. Get past the judgment words for those others and for ourselves. When you find yourself saying, that was a really lazy thing you did, or not do, or any of the words that you might describe yourself negatively, don't judge it. Say, I wonder why I made that judgment. What's going on behind the scenes? Because I'm not always lazy. I'm not always any of those things. What is going on right now? Oh, I'm hungry. Oh, I didn't get enough sleep last night. I didn't get exercise. I need to take some quiet time. Whatever it is, start that self-care. Self-care is probably the most important thing to do to get past judgments. And we talk about self-care. I'm going to have to ask Mary which webinar that we do, but she may put it in the chat room. But we talk about self-care, and especially around the holidays, that is something that goes out or off our list because we have too long of a list. And really, self-care should be at the beginning of the list. So I want to encourage you to make it for the next 6 weeks, Make self-care a priority every day, whether it is a 15-minute walk, a bath, a nap, whatever it is. But that is how you start loving yourself and start to decrease judgment. So I told you about action plans. So here we are. A proposed strategy or course of action. In your handout, you will see the personal action plan, and we have an example underneath. I want you to think of a focus area, very specific area that you want to work on, and it can be a skill, a relationship, or an environment. And I want you to, what does it look like? What's your desired outcome or improvement? And then what action steps are you going to take to walk that out? And they can be baby steps. When I thought about going to my son's, my focus area was on our relationship. My concrete goal would be that he would feel loved and not judged. And the action steps, and I could see that by how he communicated with me. And the action steps were speak less, listen more, put a rubber band around my wrist and pop myself if I was starting to go down the judgment path or start to say things to fix them or whatever. Since that visit, I also mute myself when we are talking on the phone so that even if I say something, just knee-jerk reaction, that he doesn't hear it until I filter it. So those are kind of the action steps I took to work on our relationship. And I'm going to give you a couple minutes to think about that. If you hop off now, you may not get to it. So we're going to take 1 minute here, and then I'm going to invite Mary to come in and give us a wrap up. And I'm going to stop the recording after you've worked for 1 minute. So on your mark, get set, go.